Live for Excellence Productions presents Protect Yourself Now. Violence Prevention for Healthcare Workers by Ray A. Stonehouse and narrated by Madison from Google. Copyright 2020 by Ray A. Stonehouse. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced in any form or by any electronic or mechanical means, including information storage and retrieval systems, without written permission from the author, except for the use of brief quotations in a book review. Disclaimer: the publisher and the author are providing this book and its contents on an as-is basis, and make no representations or warranties of any kind with respect to this book or its contents. The publisher and the author disclaim all such representations and warranties, including but not limited to warranties of healthcare for a particular purpose. In addition, the publisher and author assume no responsibility for errors, inaccuracies, omissions, or any other inconsistencies herein. Audiobook ISBN 9781998813186. Introduction. Once upon a time, it was safe to go to work. Maybe that's a fairy tale because the times have certainly changed. Increased violence has become part of our everyday life, be it at home or at work. We read about it daily in the newspaper and are bombarded with violent stories from the television and radio. As a group, healthcare workers tend to view people as being basically good. However, reality shows us that even good people do bad things at times. Under the right circumstances, or the wrong depending on your point of view, any of us can lose control and become aggressive. As healthcare workers, we have tended to recognize violence as only arising from our patients. A fellow worker, a manager, a client or their family, or even a visitor can become potentially hazardous to us. The bad guys aren't always strangers to us. Working in the healthcare field, we regularly come in contact with people from all walks of life. It seems a grim irony that caregivers, people concerned with the welfare of others, should daily face the possibility of violence at the hands of the very people they are there to help. Yet, increasing evidence of the extent of the problem is emerging. Protect Yourself has evolved over the past 30 years or so by me, Ray Stonehouse, while working as a registered nurse. Years ago, while working in a mid-sized psychiatric hospital, by virtue of being a male nurse, I was automatically a member of the Goon Squad, a non-flattering term used to describe the emergency response team. I will readily admit that for the first couple of years working in psychiatry, I was terrified of having to intervene physically. I was a talker, not a fighter. Now that I reflect on those days, I can't say I was all that comfortable handling verbal aggression directed at me either. Fortunately for me, I had the opportunity to attend a week-long workshop entitled Crisis Intervention provided in-house. Throughout the course, I learned many self-defense and physical restraining techniques I was able to utilize in my role as a psychiatric nurse. The most important lesson learned was that the best weapons I possessed for self-defense purposes were my brain and my mouth. I left the workshop with a greater sense of self-confidence. Over the years, I have met and worked with many people who were confident in various aspects of their lives, but were terrified when it came to intervening in a crisis where there was the likelihood it may turn physical. Even the possibility of physical aggression would trigger a fear response. I have worked alongside colleagues who would conveniently lock themselves in the bathroom at the first sign of a potential crisis. Others have had an emergency phone call that needed their attention, away from the action. I recall Mary, a fellow nurse who was an avid skydiver. Skydiving would be an activity that I would only undertake if I was pushed out of the airplane against my will. When situations arose that required physical intervention with a disturbed patient, she was crippled with fear. After taking the crisis intervention program, and with further on-the-job practice to hone her skills, Mary was able to overcome her fears of physically intervening and became an effective responder in a crisis. Protect Yourself has been developed for all the Marys out there. And the Rays too, for that matter. Protect Yourself provides an integrative, nonviolent approach to dealing with physical aggression and verbal threat. Its method of information delivery is intended to help you develop greater awareness and vigilance, hone observational and judgment skills, and to learn communication techniques to diffuse potentially volatile situations. Physical interventions, such as restraining techniques and breakaway techniques, may be mentioned throughout this manual, but will not be expanded upon as they are beyond the scope of this manual. The term healthcare workers encompasses a large group of people, from nurses and nursing support staff, to social workers, office staff, laundry, dietary, and housekeeping. If you work with people, then Protect Yourself is for you. Protect Yourself is a practical how-to manual that will enable you to assess and identify disturbed aggressive behavior, provide effective therapeutic interventions for the benefit of your clients, develop winning attitudes to prevent aggressive behavior, utilize communication and leadership techniques to avoid client escalation and prevent disturbed behavior, recognize the effects of your body language in resolving a crisis, identify the influence that healthcare staff have on violence by a client, take a proactive approach in developing worksite violence prevention protocols, recognize a bully at work and develop strategies to minimize their damage, recognize and support a colleague that is experiencing the effects of a critical incident. William Feather, 1889–1981, is often quoted as saying, "Knowledge is power." Mr. Feather is only partially correct. Knowledge is only power when it is used to achieve a goal. This program takes a proactive approach to minimizing the effects of violence towards those working in healthcare. If the term proactive is a new concept to you, it might be helpful to see where the word is derived. Definitions. Activism, the policy or practice of doing things with decision and energy and emphasizing activity. Advocacy, from the Latin advocare, to summon for counsel, a, one who supports or defends a course, and b, one who pleads in another's behalf. Proactive, active in advance, anticipating trends and working to promote their development. Protect Yourself follows the basic structure identified in personal protection literature, that is, the 3 A's: awareness, assessment, action. We begin with an overview of violent and aggressive behavior within the healthcare field. We then explore methods and criteria for assessing the potential of violence. It progresses into crisis, what crisis, an exploration of the nature of crisis, and systematically develops strategies to effectively diffuse a crisis. We discuss a recently recognized form of workplace violence, that of bullying and horizontal vertical violence. This develops into an exploration of 2 possible consequences of workplace violence: post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and burnout. Finally, therapeutic communication skills are explored, and we look at proactive techniques and resources you can utilize in developing a violence prevention program for your own worksite. Throughout this manual, I have used what I refer to as the onion method of instruction. That is, we look at a particular point, explore it, then peel back another layer and study it once again, perhaps from a different angle. It is important to note that many of us likely believe that violent behavior comes without warning and from the least expected source. This isn't always true. The warning signs are there if we are tuned to them. We need to be vigilant and proactive in our goal to prevent workplace violence. This is a practical manual in dealing with workplace violence. You will find extensive use of bulleted lists and checklists. Some of these lists are called quick lists. This has been done intentionally, so you can take them and use them as a tool in your worksite. Start talking about violence in your workplace. The silence has gone on for far too long. Author's note: this manual has developed from many years of personal experience by the author. Much of the information has been gleaned from other sources and repackaged into a form that is practical, yet easy to use. Whilst every effort has been taken to ensure accuracy in the preparation of the material in this manual, the author shall neither have liability nor responsibility to any person or entity with respect to any loss or damage caused or alleged to be caused directly or indirectly by the information contained within. The purpose of this manual is to educate and suggest strategies to reduce the likelihood you will be injured at work. It does not constitute a definitive or authoritative statement of the law. Section 1. The problem of violence in the workplace. Chapter 1. Overview. The problem of violence in the workplace. There is a disturbing trend in our society towards violence, and it is clearly reflected in the growing number of incidents of physical, verbal, and emotional acts of violent, aggressive, assaultive, and/or threatening behavior being reported to police. A report by the Ministry for Women's Equality, British Columbia, Canada, 1999, noted that 1 in 4 women is the victim of domestic violence. Sadly, this trend is reflected in the growing violence against healthcare providers, most of which are women. In community care settings, incidents are also on the rise as community care providers care for more high-risk clients. Incidents involving aggressive language, slapping, biting, and kicking, while less frequently reported, are also part of the violence toward healthcare providers. Statistics would seem to indicate that violence within healthcare is on the rise. I was taught to be wary of statistics. There is an old adage, figures never lie, but liars can figure. Now, I'm not saying that statisticians are liars, but statistics can be used to illustrate any point. The biggest criticism against current workplace violence statistics is they do not reflect the true picture. One reason cited is that violence in the workplace will not always be reported to the employer. The worker may see the event as trivial or accept some amount or degree of violence as part of the job description. Alternatively, the worker may perceive there will be no benefit or value in reporting the incident to the employer. Some may feel they might be blamed for the incident, and their job may be placed at risk if they report it. Violence at work may also not be reported to the police. Again, the incident may be seen as trivial and as part of the job. Or it may be that the perpetrator of the violence would not likely be charged criminally, given his or her state of mind. This is particularly true of violence from elderly, psychiatric, or mentally handicapped clients. In 1986, while I was working in a psychiatric hospital, a patient purposely attacked and assaulted me. I contacted our local police department and tried to press charges. They just laughed at me and told me that it was part of my job, just as it was part of theirs. They said they would press charges if I really wanted to, but why bother? The guy was crazy anyway. I'll leave you to your own thoughts on that one. Finally, workers are often reluctant to report violence to their workers' compensation board. Again, the incident may be viewed as trivial or as part of the job risk. As mentioned before, how many workers are cautious of reporting because of the idea that they may lose their jobs? It seems to be the new reality that there are people lining up at the door for our job if we can't do it, or some employers would have us believe. In addition, many workers may see the claims process, i.e., completing the WCB workers' compensation forms, as being too cumbersome. They might bypass this requirement by phoning in sick, utilizing their short-term sick leave. You have to wonder how many employers encourage the worker to book off sick, rather than make a WCB claim. This would keep the employer's assessment premiums lower. Some workers may erroneously believe that by completing a claims form, they are admitting they were at fault, or blame be placed on them for the incident. The intent of this manual is to focus on violence in the workplace, specifically in a healthcare setting. Recent statistics consistently relate that the nursing profession is composed of 98% women. It is difficult to separate the concept of work and non-work. A British Columbia, Canada initiative, Live Violence Free, from 1998, stated the following facts about violence against women. Because such a small percentage of violent crime is reported, especially spousal and sexual assaults, where women are the primary victims, many of the statistics used in the Live Violence Free information sheets were taken from the Violence Against Women survey. This 1993 survey by Statistics Canada is the only statistically reliable report on women's experience of violence. The survey found that 5.38 million Canadian women have experienced violence. 1 in 4 Canadian women were victims of assault by a spouse or partner. 1 in 3 Canadian women were victims of sexual assault. Women are the victims in 4 out of 5 spousal murders, according to 1997 homicide statistics. 1 in 2 BC women were victims of sexual assault. 1 in 3 BC women were victims of assault by a spouse or partner. 1 in 6 BC women were victims of sexual attack by a date or boyfriend. Young women's experience of violence. The 1993 Adolescent Health Survey in British Columbia found that 32% of girls and 15% of boys between grades 7 to 12 had been sexually and/or physically abused. Grade 11 girls experienced the highest rate of abuse. 28% had been physically abused. 28% had been sexually abused. The previous statistics are Canadian and may be considered dated, but should serve to illustrate the connection between violence at home, i.e., non-work activities, and the workplace. Let's look at the concept of violence a little closer.